I spent most of my life trying to meet everyone else's expectations, both the real expectations that they had of me and the imaginary ones I completely made up in my head. You know, that constant pressure and anxiety to make sure everyone else is happy and content even though you're completely draining your own energy? It took me so long to realize just how out of sync I was with my own wants and needs in the process of trying to please everyone else, and what a disservice I was doing to myself as a people pleaser. And of course, there's a catch. Every single time you bend over backwards for someone else, you end up feeling lesser and lesser like yourself. When you work so hard on trying to make everyone else like and approve of you, you oftentimes end up not very much liking yourself. And the tricky part is, unless you dig deep and figure out why your brain consistently engages in these people-pleasing behaviors, whether it's a fear of abandonment, whether it's childhood trauma, or just years of being conditioned to seek approval, you're never going to break out of this cycle. You're going to be stuck in this endless loop of shrinking yourself in order to meet everyone else's expectations of you. So we're going to get into what people pleasing is, a couple of exercises that you can practice in order to prevent yourself from actually doing this over and over again, and how to stay consistent enough to break out of the habit of people pleasing. If that's the kind of content you relate to and want to hear more about, hi, I'm Sue and welcome to my channel. Here we talk about everything self-development, personal growth, manifestation, goal setting, entrepreneurship, and so much more. If you're into keeping it real and you want to learn and grow alongside people who are on a similar life journey as you, then hit that subscribe button because I post every week, and let's get into it. So let's get into understanding who a people pleaser really is. A people pleaser is not just somebody who is nice and goes out of their way to help people. It's someone who consistently disregards their own wants and needs and puts everyone else's wants and needs on priority in order to make them happy. Whether it's saying yes when you really want to say no, whether it's establishing strict boundaries in relationships or friendships, or if it's just pushing your feelings to the side so that you make sure everyone else is comfortable, all of these encompass people-pleasing tendencies. We've usually talked about the 3 bodily responses that we as humans have to environmental stressors: flight, fight, and freeze. However, there is a 4th type of response, and it's called fawning. Fawning is this deep-rooted need to make everyone else happy, to avoid conflict and maintain the peace at all costs. The problem with fawning is that it trains your brain to associate a sense of safety with acceptance and approval from others. So fawning and people-pleasing tendencies come from a fear of abandonment, and they can be traced all the way back to our childhood and how our relationships look like with our primary caregivers, which in most cases are our parents. If you grew up in an environment where your parent showed you love conditionally, whether they were emotionally absent, abusive, controlling, or were just inconsistent with the way that they showed you love and affection, then you more often than not grow up to have people-pleasing behavior. So my childhood was pretty rough. I think I grew up in what I would now term to be a shame-based environment where my caregivers were very inconsistent with the way that they showed me love and affection. The smallest mistake I would make would lead to the biggest conflict and almost lead to an atmosphere which made me feel very unsafe as a child. So this basically trained my brain to be as good as I can possibly be in order to seek their approval and their love. And this translates to, as an adult, trying to be as good as possible so that you can feel like you have some sort of semblance of control over how others perceive you and over your own life. By the time I was 20, I'm 24 now, but by the time I was 20, I had no concept of what boundaries were, couldn't say no to anyone, used to put everybody else's needs before mine, and also entered relationships and friendships that were so codependent and toxic and even sometimes abusive. How do you get over something that you've been doing for years? You've indulged in this as if it was second nature for so long that it's almost become too comfortable to get out of. You first begin with separating yourself from it. People pleasing is not who you really are. It's not an attribute that you have. It's just a mechanism. It's a habit. It's a survival strategy that your brain came up with in order to make you feel safe. So start with recognizing it for what it is. It's just a false sense of safety. It's a method that your brain came up with in order to seek approval and feel safe. Once you understand that, you can begin undoing it. So let's talk about some exercises that you can put into practice today to stop yourself from people pleasing. One of my favorite exercises that I do is consistently ask myself the question why until I get to the root cause of why I'm feeling a certain way. Think of it like peeling back the layers of an onion. So if I were to do the exercise right now, I would ask myself something like, why do I have such a deep need to be validated by others? Okay, maybe it's because it gives me a sense of accomplishment. Why does it give me this sense of accomplishment? Well, it's because I can't validate myself and give myself that validation from within, and I can't feel enough. Why is it that I can't feel enough? Why is it that I can't validate myself? Well, maybe it's because when I was a child, I tried very hard to receive approval and love from an emotionally volatile parent and try to guess what their reaction might be to something I did or did not do. Which means I have conditioned myself to put their needs and wants and feelings over my own and condition myself to make everyone else feel heard rather than making myself feel seen. And that's the root cause of why I people please. The most important part of this exercise is to give yourself a lot of compassion when you're trying to find out the answers to these questions. For most of us, it takes visiting parts of our mind that we have kept locked away for such a long time, maybe because of uncomfortable experiences or childhood trauma. And the entire process might turn out to be really uncomfortable for you. So give yourself a lot of love when you're actually figuring out the reason why you might be a people pleaser. It's great that you want to evolve, but you can only evolve from a place of love. The next step would be to ask yourself another line of questioning to find out who the most authentic version of you really is. Some of these questions can look like, what are my values? What are some non-negotiables that I have in friendships and relationships? Who am I when nobody else is watching? What makes me genuinely happy? What are some boundaries that people just cannot cross with me? All of this allows you to figure out who you really are authentically and what makes you happy or unhappy. Once you find the answers to these questions, create a character out of it. Create a character out of your most authentic self. And when you find yourself in a situation where you're giving into the tendency of people pleasing, ask yourself, would my most authentic self do this? Would my most authentic self say no to this person or say yes to this person or consider this person's opinion to even be valuable in this moment? Whatever your most authentic self would do that and don't second guess it. The next point I want to make is probably the biggest hack for people who are very logically oriented to stop themselves from people pleasing. The logic is simple. Everyone's opinion of you or what you're doing is based on their own projections of themselves, their past experiences, their childhood, the environment that they grew up in, the preconceived notions that they have grown up with, and so much more. Everyone's opinion is formed by a series of variables that were always going to be out of your control. So you trying to change that right now is not really going to work in your favor. It's, if anything, going to make you internalize something that was never in your control in the first place. The people you admire or the people whose success you wish for yourself were people who were misunderstood, criticized, and even hated perhaps. But none of that stopped them from achieving what they wanted to in life and being the most authentic version of themselves. So what is stopping you from doing the same? If you're liked by everyone, you live a life where you're either liked or people at best tolerate you. You'll never stand out. Not everyone is meant to like you. Do you like everyone? I guess not, right? The stacks are forever going to be against you. Like, if your goal is to make everyone like you, it is the most unrealistic goal you could possibly set for yourself. No one's opinion is your responsibility. You were not put on this beautiful planet to impress anybody or to take anyone else's opinion on who you are and what you should be doing. Your only duty in this lifetime is to focus as deeply as you can on being as authentic as possible. And that purpose is far greater than the people you're worried about today. And I know some of you are going to say it's easier said than done, which is why I'm going to say it's a daily practice. And I'm going to give you a very real example of this. I found myself falling back into these tendencies as recently as yesterday. Even though I do consider myself to have done a lot of inner work to get out of my people-pleasing tendencies, I do still find myself sometimes giving into them. I found myself doing that yesterday, which is why I took a step back and told myself, hey, I know this tendency is cropping up, and I also know I'm about to give into it, which is why I'm going to take a step back, and instead of giving into it, I'm going to hit record and record this video instead. And this video is literally a result of me catching myself red-handed in the act of people-pleasing. Rather than going through with it, I did something for myself instead. Making these kind of decisions repeatedly is what will help you break that habit. You know, they say compounding is the 8th greatest wonder of this world. And they usually say this in finance, but I think it applies in self-development as well. The more decisions you make that are in your favor, the more you say no to others, the more you choose yourself, the more you establish strong boundaries that people can't cross, the more comfortable you're going to actually get in doing that. You're not going to start off with being fully comfortable doing this. It's going to suck saying no to people. It's going to be hard to establish boundaries. You're going to probably second guess yourself, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get with it. And remember, embarrassment is a choice. If your greatest fear is doing or not doing something because somebody is going to judge you, that's a choice you're making. That's not your default disposition. The minute you choose to stop being embarrassed and the minute you choose to not take anybody else's validation as the only validation you'll ever have, that's when everything changes. External validation can never fulfill you. It has to come from within. And the minute it comes from within, you're actually playing the game on your own rules. If you walk into every room, every conversation, every situation telling yourself, I love myself, I love what I stand for, and whatever is meant for me will find its way to me, you're going to be unshakable. And you're also then going to attract the kind of people who respect that about you, who respect your boundaries, who love you for who you are, who you authentically are. And I don't think anybody on planet Earth deserves any lesser than that. It takes time, but once you get to that point where you unburden and unshackle yourself from the opinions of others, you live a much freer and more fulfilled life. That's it for this video, folks. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Please comment down below which tips and tricks you resonate with the most, or you relate with the most, or which have been the most helpful for you, or comment down topics that you'd like me to discuss in later videos, because I'd love to talk more about the things that you guys want to hear the most about. Thank you so much for listening, and see you in the next video.